Hey guys, ballparkkenan here, and today we're going to learn how to build a helicopter. I'm going to show you two different ways to do this, the first with ACBs and the second with a LUA script, which gives you a few more options in terms of what your helicopter can do. First, we'll need to place the dedicated heli blade spinner above the center of mass. If you want to use multiple dedicated heli blade spinners to create something like an osprey, they don't have to be directly above the center of mass, they just have to be above it and balanced around it. So if one's 3 blocks away from the center of mass and another one's 2 blocks from the center of mass, it'll cause problems. So just make sure they are the same number of blocks away from the center of mass. You'll want to make sure the thrust is balanced as well. For example, you can have 2 heli blades in the front and 1 in the back. The 2 heli blades in the front need to be producing the same amount of thrust the one in the rear is. You just need to take the motor drive of the rear dedicated heli blade spinner and divide it by 2 for the 2 front heli blades. For example, if the heli blade spinner in the back has its motor drive set to 10, the 2 front heli spinners would need their motor drive set to 5. Next, we'll place the heli blade extension block. Make sure the larger end is facing towards where the heli blade will be spinning. In our case, it is clockwise. Next, we'll want to select the dedicated heli blade spin block and set the always up fraction to 1. Then we'll want to place 2 automated control blocks. These make our propeller spin. This first ACB is going to control our heli's minimum altitude. Under condition, select altitude over sea or terrain. Set the minimum value to no limit, and then set the max value to the lowest altitude you want your heli to go. Under Target, select Spin Block, and under Actions, select Set Rotation Speed if in continuous mode. The value is how fast the heli blade is going to spin. You want to set this high enough so your helicopter lifts off. I set it to 30 just for this example, and your helicopter shouldn't lift off just yet. We have to tweak some settings, but we'll get to that in a second. The other ACB is going to control your helicopter's maximum altitude. Under condition, again, select altitude over sea or terrain. Set the max value to no limit. Then set the minimum value to the highest altitude you want your helicopter to go. Under Target, select Spin Blocks, and under Action, select Set Rotation Speed if in continuous mode. Now the value here needs to be low enough so your helicopter loses altitude. Next, we'll go back to the dedicated heli blade spinner and change the motor drive. This uses engine power to give your helicopter lift. Set this high enough so your helicopter gains altitude. In my case, I only really needed to set it to 1, but you'll most likely have a completely different number than me. If your helicopter keeps climbing past the max height you set, lower the rotation speed of your heli blade that was set in our max height ACB. You can also lower the dedicated heli blade spinner's motor drive. Next, we'll place the tailplane. This helps your helicopter turn left and right. Make sure these are placed at the rear of your helicopter and that the white part is facing towards the front. Next, we want to give our helicopter some type of forward thrust. In my case, I'm using jet engines. Make sure the center of your thrusting blocks, in my case jet engines, are in line or balanced around the center of mass. If they're not, you'll see your helicopter start to climb or descend. Next, we'll place down a mainframe, a card slot, and an aerial AI card. In the aerial AI card, the first setting we can change is start turning when the angle deviation is over 10. This sets where the helicopter will be facing. The lower the value, the more direct the helicopter's front will be facing the enemy. And of course, the higher the value, the more the helicopter will look away from the enemy. Next, we'll want to set the roll to turn if angle deviation is over to 180. Then we'll want to change the most extreme roll angle to 0. Next, we'll set the cruising altitude to what our max height was, in my case 100. It isn't necessary to set the minimum altitude, but if you want to, you can set it to your minimum altitude that you had set in your control box. And then under the distance settings, we can change how far away we begin our attack run with the helicopter and how close we get before aborting our attack run. So with the settings it's set at now, our helicopter will begin its attack run at 250 meters away from an enemy, and then abort it once it gets within 50 meters of an enemy. And then under the miscellaneous configuration, we can set how long our helicopter will wait before beginning a new attack run. With that done, building a helicopter with ACBs is done. Now we'll move on to building a helicopter with a LUA script. The LUA script is essentially a more advanced version of the ACB method, meaning that there's way more things you can customize and that the AI is a lot more precise. You'll need everything we place in the ACB section except the ACBs. You also need an aerial AI card, but you can leave the default settings. First, we need to go on to the Steam Workshop and subscribe to the Hover Gunship / Airplane AI by Draba. The link's in the description. And then save it to your blueprints. Then we'll spawn in the Hover Gunship Airplane AI vehicle and take the LUA script from it. We'll go to the LUA box on the vehicle, select it, press Ctrl A to select all of the text, and then Ctrl C to copy it. Next, we'll go over to our helicopter. We'll place the LUA box, which can be placed anywhere on your helicopter, and then with the LUA box placed, we'll paste the LUA script into it. To do this, simply press Ctrl V. Once you've done that, be sure to click Apply Changes to save it. There are 3 main modes you can set your helicopter to. To select a mode, you can type or copy and paste the mode you want in between the quote marks. The first is frontal. Your helicopter will turn itself towards the target and attempt to dodge incoming fire if configured to do so. If you're using this mode, you want to place thrusters on the front and back sides, front and back top and or bottom, and finally thrusters to control roll. These rolling thrusters aren't absolutely necessary, but it'll help if your helicopter has to adjust for recoil. Now keep in mind that adding jets to the bottom of your craft will tend to turn it into a hovercraft rather than a helicopter, as the LUA script will use the jets under it to provide lift. With the orbiter and attack run modes, the extra jets aren't necessary, but you can always put them on if you would like. In orbiter mode, your helicopter will orbit the target at a set distance. You can change this distance by changing the optimal distance in the LUA editor. Right now it's set to 1500, so the helicopter will try to stay 1500 meters away from the target. Lastly, we have attack run mode. The helicopter will fly towards the target, break off at a set distance, and turn around and re-engage after a set time or distance. You can change the attack run settings under attack run configuration. Now going over these settings really quick. Attack run break distance is how close your helicopter will get to a target before turning. Attack run pitch distance is the distance at which your helicopter will match the target's altitude. Attack run re-engage distance is how far your helicopter will get from a target before re-engaging. Attack run re-engage time is how many seconds will pass before your helicopter will re-engage. You can change your helicopter's altitude settings under altitude. Optimal altitude is the altitude your helicopter will try and stay at. The optimal distance setting is where your helicopter will try and stay this many meters away from a target. The min and max altitude set your helicopter's minimum and maximum heights. Be sure to set your helicopter's optimal altitude in between these two. Hopefully this gave you a good idea of what these settings are and how they affect your helicopter. If you have any questions or you're having issues with something not working as it should, post it in the comments below and I'll try to help you out. Thanks for watching.